and welcome to this week's video. This week I'll be doing a review on the Derwent Graphitint paint pan set as well as the Derwent watercolour paper, but our main focus is going to be on this paint set. Now this paint set is a rather unique type of pen, as in this paint has graphite inside, which gives this a sort of like tonal effect on your paint and a slight glimmer. Now this range actually I believe is based on the sort of like pencils that they have, like this sort of like blend of like a graphite pencil with watercolour. And on the back of the box it says Derwent Graphitint paint set includes a unique blend of graphite with colour to create subtle muted tones with a graphite sheen. Fine graphite particles settle within the paper grain to create a myriad of effects. Apply on cold pressed watercolour paper to bring out pools of granulation and passages of tone and colour. The subtle muted colour palette is ideal for urban natural landscapes or expressive art. Contains 12 graphite paint pans, a mini water brush, a sponge and 5 mixing palettes. So straight away when I saw this, I really wanted to try this with the Mushroom Hunters, because the Mushroom Hunters I end up doing a lot of background work with, and I thought it'd be really fun to try two different tones, a very moody style background and a very warm, almost like a winter versus autumn palette, and create this sort of effect between it. So looking inside the box, you can see that you've got 12 very different colours. They look very much the same here, but when they are swatched, they look very differently. And you do have a water brush in here, which is very similar to the Pentel Aqua brush and the Tezo Aqua brush, and many more different aqua brushes are out there. I've tried quite a few over the years. And of course I picked up the Derwent watercolour paper, which they say is ideal for watercolour pencils. Now it has a very smooth grain and was a delight to work with. I actually really enjoyed this paper because it's smooth and does not have that sort of grainy texture. And as you can see, the colour swatch of these, you can see like the granulation, the moodiness, and very slightly, I don't know how well you can see with this camera, there is a very slight sheen to them, and they aren't chalky, but if you press your finger and smudge them, you do get a little bit of graphite coming off up on your finger, and that's because the paint is mixed with graphite to create this sort of like moody texture. But if you can see, as I'm smudging across, it does not smudge the colour, and that is very important, of course, because we don't want to smudge our colours when it comes to creating a sort of like fun palette. So the first thing I did was I sketched out my idea, and this is for the sort of moody palette that I wanted. I wanted the feeling of like after rain, sort of winter, maybe it's a cold morning, and was trying to keep it very simple. The first thing I noticed when swatching these was if I was going to try and build colour on top of it, I was going to struggle because of the type of paint that it is. I sort of base these with those like sort of like chalky watercolours that you do get, where they have excellent colour range, absolutely beautiful to work with, but you cannot get a lot of building up on it. So you can see here I'm starting off with very light layers to try and sort of build up that texture that I'm after. This is like a sort of rock face. I imagine that the Mushroom Hunters are sort of sat inside a cave at this moment in time, and trying to build up like lots of different colours in there, so it isn't just grey. So I'm adding little bits of green, a little bit of blue in there to sort of build up the texture that I'm after. And straight away, this paint, it's got lots of beautiful texture in there. Like, I'm going to keep repeating that word because it's sort of the granulation of the paints as they separate with the graphite. If you use a lot of water, you are going to get that separation, and it does build up some beautiful texture. Now the question is, do I recommend these watercolours? There are a lot of pros and cons about this, and you will see as I am painting with these that I do struggle to build up a lot of layers, and this is because with the paint behaving the way it is, it doesn't really build up the way that traditional watercolours do. So I sort of had to change a lot of tactics there. I found that if I put water on top of paint that was already there, it was bleeding through. It wasn't always staying. Now this can create some really beautiful effects, as I've mentioned, and give you sort of that really nice moody texture that you're after, but it is a bit of a struggle to build a lot of textures on top of each other. However, the one thing I cannot fault is how beautifully they laid down, especially on this paper. I believe this is cold press smooth paper. It just looked really nice. It gave this sort of texture to my artwork that I did not have before, and I could definitely see how this would work really well with big scenery pieces, especially if you're layering sort of like light watercolors and then building up with heavier. I found that once the heavier color was down, it was really difficult to then put paint up on top, so you would struggle with that. I mean, I suppose the best sort of thing to try would be later on, and I've just thought of this now and I'm kicking myself for not trying it for this video, would be to try it on top of other watercolors to see how it would blend. So let me know if you are interested in that. The main reason why I actually wanted to really try these paints is because it came with a scroller box, I believe either this month or last month, and I saw a lot of people trying it out and I really wanted to try it out. I found a really good deal on a website called Cult Pens. I am not associated in any way, shape or form. I just really like hunting for art supplies at a decent price, and I use a few different websites. If you're based in the UK, the websites that I like to use are the Cowling and Wilcox website. They have lots of discounts up on there quite a few times. Cass Arts, they do the same, and they also have their own brand of watercolour paper and watercolours, which I do recommend. I do have a review of their actual watercolours coming up, but not for next month, just because I've got some special videos popping up for next month. It'll be in January, that review. I also use Jackson's Art Supplies, and I use a few other places as well, but it's really good to have a look around when you are pricing, just because I know how expensive art supplies can be. So after sort of like laying down my colour, I decide to do a little bit of line work, and this line art that I have here, this line art tool, is the Derwent Graphitint pen, and I will say these pens are quite old. It wasn't the smoothest just because these pens are drying out, but it did add this like sort of like nice effect to it, and I decided to go for very loose line art for this, so it wasn't massively clean and it allowed me to sort of like play around, and you can see that graphite is definitely coming off on my hand. But it sort of allowed me to build up a little bit more texture and make my lines a little bit cleaner, which just added that extra effect that I was after. So yes, you can definitely put line art on top of this. It will definitely help with your drawing. And after I've done that, I built up a little bit more texture here and there, just wanting to deepen certain shadows, especially on Freya. I really would like to have pushed it a little bit more, but I didn't know how well behaved these paints were going to be. Like I was saying, every time I was trying to put paints on top of paints, instead of creating these beautiful layers, it was just lifting up the colour underneath. So I would have been able to deepen a lot of shadows, but it just was not having it. Really quite proud of these trees though. I used quite a few different mixtures of colours to try and like create the illusion of depth, using lighter for the further away, and for trees that were closer using sort of like deeper colours to sort of strengthen the colour in between them. It was really interesting, and I really did enjoy playing around with these. Playing around with art supplies can be quite difficult because pricing, hey, some art supplies are way more expensive than others. This is why I like to use a lot of the YouTube money that I make from these videos to be able to purchase other art supplies and do reviews of them. After I'm done with the art supplies, if I want to keep them, I keep them. If not, I pass them on to people who I know would be able to get better use out of them and would be able to play around with those art supplies. I have siblings who are artists and friends who are artists who would be able to like totally use these, but I think I'm going to be keeping these just because I want to get better at doing a lot of background pieces, and I just think these would work really well. So I'm going to be using these a lot in my sketchbook, I think, to have a proper play around with them, because they were just so much fun to build up texture. The sort of second piece that I'm going for, I wanted to do a much closer sort of like Mushroom Hunters feel piece, sort of have like this very dreamy atmosphere, and I thought that this would work really well with these paints, mainly because you can't define a lot of like really like detail in there. It forces you to really think about what you are working on, mainly because, as you can see, getting detail with these, it takes a bit of time, and once you've put that darker color down, it's alright to lift off. It's not the best to lift off, if I'm honest, but you can get a lot of interesting textures. Sort of trying to create the illusion of depth by using deeper colours in certain areas, and trying to create something with a very muted palette can be very difficult, especially considering your limitation on the colours. Now, you can mix up certain colours to be able to create the colours that you do want. I was using a lot of these colours in their raw forms and not really mixing up too much. I did end up having to mix a little bit to try and get Freya's skin tone, because Freya has like quite a dark brown skin tone, but I wasn't able to get quite the colour that I wanted. But the interesting question is, since these are graphite watercolours, do they rub out? And the real answer is yes. It does leave a bit of the staining behind, but you can rub away the deeper areas of this to be able to create like sort of like a pastel effect. And you can see, especially here on the plaits where I tried to do it, how you're able to create like a small sheet, and this will create very interesting uses for background. Say for example, you've done that tree a little bit too dark, you could use the eraser to sort of lift up that area to make that tree a little bit lighter. Now this does actually rub out some of the graphite sheen. It doesn't make it exactly the cleanest, and you can see that on the tip of your eraser, of course graphite is going to come up, but that's going to happen unfortunately. It is graphite, it's going to lift up, it's not going to have the cleanest effect. And you can see here, especially with these Derwent pens, because I've had these now for years, I like to use art supplies until they're on their complete last legs and they are drying out. But it forced me to sort of think about looser line work. And in the end, I think this one might be my favourite out of the two pieces, mainly because of the pastel colour palette and of course the like sort of design. I'm gonna go back and redo this illustration I think at some point, because I like the concept, I just don't like the final execution. Apologies if you can hear some noise. My cat has decided that this is the most perfect time to play around and jump on my desk a lot. She gets like this sometimes when I'm not paying attention to her. Cats, they're needy, what can I say? You're not allowed on the desk, Missy. No. So can I recommend this? Yes and no. I can recommend it if you wanted to do like lots of textured work and add an interesting effect to some of your background layers that are up on your work. But if you're after watercolours that will create these are very different than standard watercolours. You're not going to get that clean effect that you're going to get with most watercolours. It is very moody and very tonal, so it is much recommended for doing background work. There is some positive signs of it, like the textures, you're able to create some really beautiful effects with it. However, you are going to struggle to get very clean work with it. Unfortunately, it is just not the best for that. It's just not going to happen. But overall, I really liked this. I thought it was fun. I thought I was going to have I had a great time with them, and I will be using these in my sketchbook, especially for background work. Look at that little smudgy smudge. I hope you have enjoyed this video and found it somewhat informative. If you're new to this channel, I try and do product reviews as often as I can. Like I said, I use my YouTube money to sort of like buy the art supplies so that I can try them out, so that I can give my honest opinion. I really hope that you've enjoyed this. Let me know in the comment section down below which one is your favourite. Are you the more warm autumnal scene, or do you prefer the wintry scene? Let me know. I'm always interested. And if you had these paints, what would you create with them? Very interested to see what people think of that. Here is some of your amazing fan art that you have tagged me in, or work that you have done. You make sure to use the hashtag StayCreativeWithSophiralou on Instagram or Twitter if you want your work to be featured. I try and feature as much work as I can, and I always do check out the hashtag very often. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Keep on drawing, and as always folks, stay creative.